betrayed. Broken, reborn. This is Novel Binge.
The taxi driver who knew every blind spot. When I returned to Linhai under a fake name, everyone wanted me dead. Only one night shift taxi driver knew how to get me out alive, and the route map in her car hid the truth: her brother had died trying to protect. SC Daydal. At 2:17 a.m., rain fell over the Beigang second-hand goods market. It was not a heavy rain. It was thin and cold like needle, brushing against my face. When I crawled out of storage yard number 3, my jacket had been ripped open by barbed wire, and the palm of my right hand smelled of rust and blood. Behind me, headlights flared. 2 beams. Not an accident. I moved along the shadows of the shipping containers. I did not run. At a time like this, running was the same as admitting guilt. But the men behind me did not care what I admitted. The first black minivan tore through the standing water, its tires throwing muddy spray into the air as it came straight for me. I turned and slipped through the side gate of the market. Beyond the gate was the Beigang outer ring road. At that hour, there were no buses, no pedestrians, only a few freight stalls still glowing under weak yellow lights. I pulled out my phone. The screen was cracked, and the location app was still blinking. The red dot was getting closer. I cursed under my breath, pulled out the SIM card, snapped it in half, and tossed it into a drain. Footsteps closed in behind me. Someone shouted, "Shen Hui, stop running." Shen Hui was my fake name. Not many people knew it. Even fewer knew I would be at the second-hand goods market that night. Just as I rushed out of the alley, a taxi came through the rain. It was old, yellow and white, with a dent in the rear bumper. I raised my hand. The taxi did not stop, so I stepped straight into the middle of the road. The tires screeched through a puddle and stopped less than half a meter from my knee. The driver's window rolled down. A young woman sat behind the wheel. She looked to be in her 20s. A black raincoat lay over the passenger seat. Her long hair was tied low behind her neck, and her eyes were colder than the rain outside. She glanced at my hand, then at the 2 unmarked cars coming out of the alley behind me. She did not ask who I was. She did not ask what I had done. She only said, "Get in." I opened the back door and slipped inside. The door had barely shut when the first unmarked car shot out of the alley. The woman shifted gears and turned the wheel hard left. The taxi lunged forward, skimming along the roadside guardrail. I grabbed the back of the front seat. "Drive downtown." She glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "If you want to die, go downtown." My eyes narrowed. "Do you know who's chasing us?" "No." She stepped on the gas. "But anyone chasing people out of the Beigang second-hand goods market at 2 in the morning is never harmless." The taxi did not take the main road. She drove into a narrow service lane I had almost never seen before. On both sides were abandoned cold storage buildings, their walls still marked with the faded words Linhai Port Storage. The unmarked car stayed close behind us. Its headlights poured through the rear window, harsh enough to sting my eyes. I reached toward my waist. I had a small folding knife there. The woman suddenly said, "Don't pull a knife in my car." My hand froze. It was as if she had eyes on the back of her head. "Hold on." The next second, the taxi shot onto the service road of an abandoned overpass. That road had been closed for 2 years. Concrete barriers blocked the entrance in a crooked road. She did not slow down. The front of the car squeezed through the gap between 2 barriers. The right side mirror snapped off with a sharp crack. I slammed into the door. The car behind us did not dare follow. Its brakes screamed in the rain. The second car tried to circle around, but the moment it climbed the slope, its wheels sank into a patch of mud. The whole vehicle swerved and almost hit a bridge pier. The taxi made a sharp turn just before the broken section of the overpass and slipped into the shadows beneath the bridge. There were no streetlights, no cameras, only rain engine noise and the sound of my own breathing. As the bridge piers slid past the window, my back slowly tightened. She knew this place too well to be an ordinary night shift driver. 10 minutes later, the car stopped in the alley behind the old taxi fleet in the north of the city. The woman killed the engine. The windshield wipers were still moving, sweeping rain across the glass. She turned and looked at me. "We're here." I did not get out. "I never said I wanted to come here. You have a temporary employee badge from the North City taxi fleet on your shirt." She pointed at my chest. I looked down. When I had searched the storage yard earlier, half of my employee card must have slipped out of my inner pocket. She had noticed it with one glance. I smiled. "You have sharp eyes." She did not smile. "You have a strong will to live." I placed the fare on the center armrest. An ordinary driver wouldn't take those roads. An ordinary passenger wouldn't crawl out of Beigang freight yard in the middle of the night. She took one bill, then pushed the rest back. "The broken mirror is on me." "Why?" "I don't take money from unknown sources." I looked at her hand. Her fingers were slender, but her knuckles were rough from years of gripping a steering wheel. She tore off a receipt and handed it to me. When I looked up, I saw the name tag pinned to her chest. Shu Nanji, North Linhai Taxi Fleet, night shift driver. I opened the door and stepped into the rain. Her voice came from inside the car. "Shen Hui." I stopped. She was looking at her distorted reflection in the rearview mirror. "Don't go back to the Beigang second-hand goods market." I turned around. "Why?" She started the car. The taillights glowed in the rain like 2 dull red sparks. "There's a dead man there." "I am not Shen Hui. My name is Lu Chen, 3 years ago, the most profitable logistics company in Linhai was called Langang. My father, Lu Heng, founded it. Whenever people in Linhai talked about North Port, cold chain logistics, or container transport, they always ended up talking about Langang. Then one explosion tore it all apart. A container at Beigang number 17 caught fire and exploded during transport. 3 trucks and 2 cold storage facilities were destroyed. 7 people died. After the investigation, every accusation pointed at Langang. Illegal transport, undeclared cargo, unauthorized route changes. That night my father suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. The stroke left him in a coma. When I walked out of the hospital, reporters had already surrounded the Langang building. Someone shoved a microphone into my face and asked if I knew the inside story. Online, people claimed the Lu family's young heir had transferred assets ahead of time and was preparing tea. Oh, flee. I did not explain. Not because I did not want to. At that time, I did not even know who I could trust. In 3 years, Langang was dismantled, its assets seized, and its former employees scattered. The biggest winner was Han Xiaoyuan. He used to be my father's most trusted vice president. After the explosion, he took over most of Beigang's transport routes and founded Beigang United Logistics. People said he had stepped forward in a crisis. I said he had stepped forward too quickly. When I returned to Linhai, I brought only one thing: a fake identity. Shen Hui, temporary substitute driver for the North City taxi fleet, because the final clue before the explosion 3 years ago pointed to a late-night taxi. That car did not appear in the official records. There was no registered plate, only a string of words and numbers my father had written at his bedside. 17Q3, Qinglan, 11:40 p.m. The doctor said he had already lost consciousness at the time. I did not believe it. All his life, my father could recite a container verification code even when he was drunk. He would not write random numbers for no reason. So, I came back to Linhai, the place everyone thought I would never dare set foot in again. I just did not expect the first person to pull me out of a chase would be Shu Nanji, and I did not expect that she would know Beigang even better than I did. The North City taxi fleet was tucked behind the old auto parts market. The yard was not big. About 20 cars were parked inside. Notices about annual inspections were pasted on the wall, and old tires were piled in the corner. When I reported for duty the next day, everyone in the yard stared at me. Their gazes were direct, hostile. The fleet captain's surname was Bao. Everyone called him Uncle Bao. He was in his 50s, overweight, with a shiny bald head and a cigarette always pinched between his fingers. As he flipped through my file, his frown deepened. Shen Hui, non-local ID, temporary address. Have you ever driven a taxi? I've driven trucks. Driving a truck and driving a taxi are two different things. He slapped the documents onto the table. We're not short of drivers. You're short on the night shift. Someone in the yard laughed. The night shift really does need people like him. I looked over. Several drivers leaned against their cars, smoking. One of them said, "That old Beigang case has been making noise again. Who knows whether he's a reporter, a debt collector, or something worse?" Uncle Bao glared at him. The man shut up. I pretended not to understand. I just want to earn some money. Linhai is huge. Why come all the way to the north side? Uncle Bao flicked ash into a paper cup. Why here? Before I could answer, a voice came from behind me. Let him stay. I turned. Shu Nanji stood at the gate, wearing a gray coat and carrying a bag of steamed buns. She did not look at me. She only said to Uncle Bao, "Old Ma is in the hospital. No one can cover the night shift." Uncle Bao's expression shifted. "Nanji, we don't know where this man came from. Even among our own drivers, how many dare take the Beigang route at night?" She placed the buns on the table. "I'll watch him for 2 days. If anything goes wrong, I'll take responsibility." The yard fell silent. Uncle Bao stared at her. "Don't get involved." Shu Nanji's tone was calm. "Don't I already have enough trouble?" After that, no one spoke. I stood aside, my guard rising another level. A female night shift driver. One sentence from her could silence the whole fleet. Last night, she had skillfully avoided every surveillance point. Today, she spoke up for a stranger. She was helping me, but she was too good at helping, as if she had been waiting for me. In the end, Uncle Bao let me stay. They assigned me a substitute car. Its plate ended in 37, and the car looked even older than the years I had been gone from Linhai. After the paperwork was done, Shu Nanji walked past me. I said quietly, "Thanks for last night." She did not stop. "Don't thank me too soon." "What do you mean?" She opened her car door. "The night shift in the north side isn't easy. The first time I worked a night shift with Shu Nanji, it was 10 in the evening. She told me to sit in the passenger seat. Watch the road first. I can drive. People who have driven trucks are the most likely to turn taxis into hearses." Her tone was perfectly even. I glanced at her. "Do you always talk like this?" "Depends on whether the passenger can take it." I said nothing. Her car was very clean. There were no decorations on the dashboard, only an old paper route folder. When she turned a corner, I caught a glimpse of the map inside. It was a map of northern Linhai. Several points had been circled in red. Beigang Outer Ring Road, Qinglan Bridge, East Pier 7, the abandoned overpass, and several nameless alleys. They all had one thing in common: weak surveillance. Just as I was about to look closer, Shu Nanji reached out and snapped the route folder shut. "Don't touch a driver's things." I smiled. Professional habit. When you drove trucks, did you also peek at other people's routes? I looked at container manifests. The car went quiet for a moment. She glanced at me through the rearview mirror. Container manifests. I realized I had said too much. Who, in logistics, hasn't seen one? She did not ask anything else, but I saw her fingers tighten around the steering wheel. At 1 in the morning, the fleet was suddenly stopped for inspection. Several enforcement vehicles blocked the fleet entrance, followed by 2 black sedans. Uncle Bao rushed out of the duty room, his face grim. Why are they checking again? The man leading the group held a photo in his hand. Routine inspection. We're also looking for someone. The corner of the photo was wet from the rain. I looked through the window. My pupils tightened. It was me. 3 years ago. Short hair, suit, standing at the entrance of the Langang building. Lu Chen. Xu Nanji saw it too. Without turning around, she said, "Get out. Now. Maintenance room on the right. Go inside, and don't make a sound." I did not move. She turned slightly. "Do you want them to find you in my car?" I opened the door, got out, circled behind the car, and slipped into the repair room. Jacks, old batteries, and used tires were piled everywhere. The bitter smell of motor oil burned my throat. I had just hidden behind a partition when someone passed outside. Xu Nanji stood in the doorway. "If you're inspecting cars, inspect the cars. Why are you searching the repair room?" Somebody reported that your fleet is hiding a person. Hiding who? Lu Chen. Xu Nanji gave a short laugh. If the Lu family's young master were hiding in our broken-down fleet, his standards would have fallen pretty far. The man's voice turned cold. "Xu Nanji, don't get clever." "Do I get paid for being clever?" she said. "You can inspect the car. If you want to touch my personal things, show me the paperwork first." There was a commotion outside. I leaned against the partition, fingers pressed against the folding knife in my pocket. A few minutes later, the footsteps retreated. I released my grip. The repair room door opened a crack. Xu Nanji leaned in. "Come out." I had just taken one step when her phone lit up. The screen faced me. A message appeared. "Is he still in your car?" There was no name attached, only a string of numbers. I stopped. Xu Nanji saw it too. She turned off the screen at once. "Let's go." I looked at her. "Who sent that?" "None of your business. They were looking for Lu Chen just now." And the next second someone asks, "If he's still in your car." She stared at me. "Are you Lu Chen?" I smiled. If I were Lu Chen, would I be driving a taxi at night? "Then, what are you afraid of?" "I'm afraid you'll sell me out." A coldness flashed through her eyes. "Then get out now." The inspectors had not all left yet. I looked at her. She looked back at me. In the end, I opened the car door and got in. From that moment, I was sure of one thing. Xu Nanji was not innocent. Late that night, we got a ride request to the Beigang Outer Ring Road. The passenger was drunk and fell asleep as soon as he got in. Xu Nanji drove steadily. I sat in the passenger seat, my eyes on the route folder beside her. She suddenly said, "Stop staring." "I'm not. Your eyes are about to burn a hole through it." I smiled. "That route is unusual. You always choose roads with fewer cameras. Night shift drivers know where the traffic jams are, where checkpoints appear, and where there's less trouble. Less trouble, or easier places to dump a body." She turned her head and looked at me. "You seemed pretty grateful when I dumped you somewhere safe last night." I said nothing. The rain had stopped. Outside the window, rows of dim lights stretched across Beigang. I said deliberately, "I owe money. People are chasing me. Thanks to you last night, I got away." "How much?" 300,000. "For 300,000, unmarked cars chased you all the way to the second-hand goods market." Her tone carried a faint edge of mockery. "Debt collectors by the sea are that hardworking now. You don't believe me. Whether I believe you doesn't matter." She looked ahead. "What matters is whether you believe yourself." The car fell silent again. The drunk passenger snored in the back. I changed the question. "Why did you help me?" She did not answer. I continued. "Don't say it was out of justice. You don't look like that kind of person." This time, she smiled, very faintly. "What kind of person do I look like?" "Like someone who knew I was coming." She braked at a red light. The wet road glowed red. She turned her head, her eyes distant. "Do you really think the Beigang fire was caused by a container exploding on its own?" Something struck hard, inside my chest. Over the past 3 years, I had heard countless versions of the story. From official reports, from the media, from the victims' families, from Han Xiaoyuan, who had looked deeply pained during interviews. But very few people had ever asked me that question in that tone. It was not curiosity. It was hatred. I stared at her. "What do you know?" The light turned green. She released the brake. "I know a man who owes 300,000 wouldn't react like that." My heart sank. She was testing me, just like I was testing her. Neither of us said what we truly meant. Whoever explained first would lose. The next evening, I followed Xu Nanji. After work, she did not go home. She drove to Qinglan Bridge. Qinglan Bridge sat between North City and Beigang. Beneath it was an abandoned parking lot once used for freight transfer trucks. After the overpass was rerouted, the place was left to rot. I parked at the bridge entrance and turned off my lights. Shunanji's taxi stopped under the bridge. She got out with an umbrella and walked to the last vehicle in the row. A scrap taxi. It was little more than half a shell. The paint had peeled away, the plate was gone, and the windshield was cracked like a spiderweb. She crouched and took a photo of the VIN with her phone. Then she circled to the trunk, searching for something. I watched through the curtain of rain. The tension inside me tightened. Chinglan Bridge. One of the words on my father's note. It had also been a mandatory point on the diverted route of container number 17 3 years ago. Why had Shunanji come here? Why was she taking photos of that car? 10 minutes later, she left. I did not follow immediately, because 2 more people came from the other end of the bridge. Black clothes, baseball caps. They pried open the doors of the scrap taxi, turned over the seats, and tore out the interior. One of them shouted. President Han said the thing might still be in the car. Search carefully. President Han. In Linhai North Port, the only person those men would call President Han was Han Xiaoyuan. My grip tightened around the steering wheel. Han Xiaoyuan was looking for the same thing Shunanji was investigating. That did not prove she was one of his people, but it proved they were after the same clue. I waited until the 2 men left, then walked over to the wreck. The inside had been torn apart. I crouched and checked the VIN. The last 4 digits were 0937. I remembered that number. By the time I returned to the fleet, it was already 4 in the morning. Shunanji sat outside the duty room, eating instant noodles. She saw me, but her face did not change. Lowe's me. I stopped. You knew I was following you. Your headlights are too dirty. They reflect badly. She lifted some noodles with her fork. Use a different car next time. I walked over. What's under Chinglan Bridge? She paused. You followed me all the way there and still need to ask. I'm asking about that scrapped taxi. She looked up. You're asking too much, Shen Hui. I took 1 step closer. Or should I call you Han Xiaoyuan's person? She set down the instant noodles. The duty room light was dim, leaving her face pale. What did you say? You saved me last night. You helped me stay in the fleet today. You know the old Beigang case. You know every surveillance blind spot. And you went to Chinglan Bridge at night to search a scrap taxi. I looked straight into her eyes. When there are too many coincidences, they stop being coincidences. She stared at me for a long time, so long that I thought she would explain. In the end, she lowered her head and picked up her instant noodles again. Think whatever you want. Those words sounded more like admission than any explanation could have. I decided to plant a false lead. I wanted to test Shunanji, and I wanted to see who else in the fleet was still taking orders from Han Xiaoyuan. That afternoon, I pretended to make a phone call in the duty room. Uncle Bao was doing accounts in the inner room. Shunanji was washing her car in the yard. I deliberately lowered my voice, but not so low that they could not hear. East Pier 7. Midnight tonight. The original records should still be in the old warehouse. Don't let anyone find out. Then, I hung up. There had been no number, no real call, only a performance. At 11:30 p.m., I arrived at East Pier 7, ahead of time. The old warehouse on the north side of the pier had been abandoned for years. Its iron gate was rusted black. I hid in a deserted office on the 2nd floor. At 12:03, a taxi pulled up. Shunanji's car. She got out without turning on the headlights, holding a flashlight, and hurried toward the warehouse. I stood in the shadows and sneered inwardly. Sure enough, she had come, but the next second I could no longer smile. 4 more sets of headlights lit up outside the warehouse. 2 unmarked cars blocked the exit. 7 or 8 men got out, steel pipes in their hands. Shunanji turned sharply. Her expression changed. Her first instinct was not to run. She shouted toward the warehouse. Shen Hui, come out. I froze. She knew I was there. The men heard her too. Lu Chen is inside. The moment that name was spoken, the air in the warehouse seemed to tighten. I jumped down from the 2nd floor. When I landed, pain shot through my knee. Shunanji rushed over and yanked me up. Are you insane? Who told you to come here? I grabbed her wrist. That's exactly what I should be asking you. Does that matter right now? She pulled me toward the side door. The men chased after us. A steel pipe struck the metal frame, and the sound rang painfully in my ears. The old warehouse was filled with discarded pallets and empty oil drums. Shunanji did not know this place. I did. It used to be Langang's temporary storage warehouse. My father had brought me here once. I was 17 then. I had thought the place was stuffy and boring, and all I wanted was to go back to the city. Now that memory was saving my life. I pulled her under a row of metal racks. How do you know? She asked, breathless. Run. Someone rounded the corner behind us. I kicked an oil drum. It rolled across the floor and tripped 2 men. We jumped down from the loading dock into an enclosed cargo passage. Ahead was a rolling shutter door. Shunanji's face tightened. Dead end. No. I found the electrical box on the wall and pried open the cover with my folding knife. The manual switch was still inside. I yanked it down. The rolling door groaned, stuck for a moment, then rose half a meter. Crawl. Shunanji squeezed out first. Just as I bent down, a steel pipe swung behind me and scraped across my shoulder. Pain blacked out my vision for a second. Shunanji turned back, grabbed me, and dragged me out. The rolling door slammed down behind us, blocking the pursuers. Outside, a black car blocked the side road. I snatched the keys from Shunanji's hand. Get in. You can drive a taxi. I can drive bigger things than this. She hesitated for 1 second, then got into the passenger seat. I started the taxi, reversed hard, and spun the wheel. The rear of the car smashed into an abandoned rack. The front wheels brushed the nose of the unmarked car as we shot forward. The car behind us tried to chase. I drove into the narrowest section of Old Goods Lane. Ahead was a bend. Beyond it lay an abandoned way station. I knew there was a pit there. The men behind us did not. I drove along the edge. The pursuing car followed too closely. Its front wheels sank straight into the hole, and the bumper slammed into the edge of the way station with a loud crash. The car behind it was blocked. Shunanji looked into the rearview mirror, her breathing still uneven. Who are you? I gripped the steering wheel and did not answer. She stared at me. An ordinary driver in debt. Wouldn't he know where the manual switch is in the old East Pier 7 warehouse? I said. An ordinary night shift driver wouldn't know I was inside. She closed her eyes for a moment. You think I came here to hurt you? I kept my eyes on the road. I did not deny it. She gave a quiet laugh. Fine. We parked behind an abandoned cold storage building. It started raining again. Fog gathered on the windows. Shunanji sat in the passenger seat. A scrape ran down her arm, and blood trickled over her wrist. I tossed her a pack of tissues. She did not take it. I opened the pack, pulled out several tissues and handed them to her. Press on it first. This time, she accepted them. The car was so quiet that only the rain could be heard. After a long silence, she said, My brother died the night of the Begang explosion. I looked at her. She stared through the windshield and did not look back. According to the official report, he violated regulations, took a private freight job, and caused chaos on the No. 17 route. Then the explosion happened. 7 people died. She pressed the tissue against her wound until her knuckles turned white. Everyone said he was greedy, that he deserved it. I said nothing. Shunanji continued. My brother's name was Shunanjo. He was a logistics dispatcher. Later, when our family fell into debt, he drove a taxi at night to help pay it off. Shu Nanjo. I had seen that name before. On the list of people responsible for the accident. Third on the list, driver violation. I had only glanced at it before moving on. There had been too many names, too many accusations. At the time, I had only seen the words Lu family, my father's name, and the curses coming from every direction. I had never thought that behind every name pushed onto that list, there might be someone else who refused to believe it. So you're investigating Begang? I asked. I'm looking for my brother. Han Xiaoyuan's men are also looking for that car. She turned toward me. Do you still think I'm working with them? I did not answer. She smiled, cold and tired. Shen Hui, you're an interesting person. How? When you're being chased, you'll get into any car that can save you. But once you're safe, you start wondering whether the person who saved you can be trusted. Those words struck harder than I expected. I wanted to explain, but the words stopped at my throat. In the past 3 years, the first thing I had learned was not to trust anyone too easily. The man my father trusted most had taken over Langang. I had trusted the media to report the truth, but they only wanted sensational headlines. I had trusted former employees to wait, but many of them had turned to Han Xiaoyuan. The very next day, it was not that I had never trusted anyone. It was that I no longer knew how. Shunanji threw the blood-stained tissues into a trash bag. I don't know who you are, and I don't want to know. She pushed open the door and stepped out. Rain soaked her shoulders at once. I called after her. Shunanji. She did not turn around. If you're really investigating your brother, why didn't you report it? She stopped outside the car. I did. Her voice mixed with the rain, so soft it was almost swallowed. They said there wasn't enough evidence. Then, she shut the car door and walked into the rain. The news that Lu Chen had returned to Linhai broke the next day. Zhou Mu, a reporter from Linhai Metropolis Daily, posted a short video. In the video, I rushed out of the old warehouse at East Pier 7. My profile was blurry, but anyone who knew me could recognize me. The headline was brutal. The Lu family heir suspected in the Begang explosion secretly returns to Linhai and appears at an old case site late at night. The comments exploded. Some cursed me for finally daring to come back. Some said the Lu family must have ghosts in its heart. Someone dug up Shunanji's taxi plate and accused her of helping a fugitive. By morning, reporters and onlookers had blocked the entrance of the fleet, filling half the street. Uncle Bao paced the yard so anxiously that smoke almost came out of him. I told you not to touch Begang. Don't touch Begang. But none of you listened. Shunanji leaned beside her car, bending down to wipe red graffiti from the door. Accomplice. One word, scrawled in blinding red paint. I walked over to help. She avoided my hand. Don't touch it. My hand froze in the air. Outside the yard, people were taking pictures. It's her. She drove Lu Chen away that night. That female driver is bold. How much did she take? How much did the Lu family pay you? Shu Nanji looked up. She did not curse. She did not explain. She simply picked up the bucket and continued wiping away the paint. The sight made something in my chest tighten. Uncle Bao hurried over and lowered his voice. Shenhui, you'd better leave. I looked at him. You're kicking me out now. I'm saving you and the fleet, he said, his face trembling. I don't want to know who you really are, but if you stay, the entire fleet will be finished. I asked, who let the reporters in? A flicker crossed Uncle Bao's eyes. How would I know? No one knew about East Pier 7, except people in this fleet. He raised his voice. What do you mean? Are you accusing me? Everyone in the yard looked over. Shu Nanji threw the rag into the bucket. Enough. She looked at me with exhaustion in her eyes. Stop treating everyone like a thief. I said nothing. She picked up the bucket and walked away. That evening, the fleet's operating permits were suddenly selected for random inspection. Shu Nanji's taxi was impounded separately. The reason given was that she was suspected of helping a fugitive hide evidence related to an old case. When they took her away for questioning, she did not look at me. I stood at the gate, my fingertips numb. Someone dropped a piece of so-called evidence onto Uncle Bao's desk. A recording. My voice. East Pier 7. Midnight tonight. The original records should still be in the old warehouse. I looked at the recording, and a chill climbed slowly up my spine. I had planted the false lead. I had set the trap. In the end, Shu Nanji had fallen into it. I finally understood. Han Xiaoyuan was not only watching me, he was using my suspicion to make me hurt her with my own hands. I found Uncle Bao smoking in the backyard, one cigarette after another. Ash fell onto his shoe, but he did not move. I walked over and played the recording for him. Who leaked it? He looked up, his eyes red. I don't know. I grabbed his collar and pinned him against the wall. Bao Quan, I'll ask once. His face changed. How do you know my full name? You think I came into this fleet without checking anything? I lowered my voice. 3 years ago, after the accident, 3 cars from the North City taxi fleet were reassigned to support Northport. You were in charge. You know better than anyone which car Shu Nanzhou drove on his last night. Uncle Bao's lips twitched. Who are you? I did not answer. Who leaked the recording? He closed his eyes. After a while, all the strength seemed to leave his body. It was me. My grip tightened. Why? Han Xiaoyuan's people came to me, Uncle Bao said hoarsely. They said if the fleet got dragged into the old Beigang case again, they would revoke all our operating licenses. He pointed toward the old cars in the yard. More than 20 drivers eat from this business. Old Ma is in the hospital. Old Zhao's kid is still in school, and Nanji. After all these years, that car is almost all she has left. So you sold her out. Uncle Bao raised his bloodshot eyes. I didn't mean to hurt her. I thought they only wanted to catch you. The moment he said it, he could not continue. Water dripped from the awning into a metal bucket, drop by drop. I released him. Where is the car Shu Nanzhou drove on his last night? Uncle Bao wiped his face. Declared totaled. The one under Qinglan Bridge? He looked up sharply. I knew, I was right. After the accident, that taxi was towed away and written off. But before he died, Nanzhou had turned in a substitute car. The meter had been removed. Where is it? Uncle Bao hesitated. I said, Shu Nanji is being questioned right now. If you keep hesitating, Han Xiaoyuan will bury her brother's name forever. That broke him. The old warehouse, he said. The fleet's old warehouse behind the auto parts market. The key is in my office. I turned to leave. Uncle Bao called after me. Shenhui. I stopped. He asked, are you Lu Chen? I did not look back. It's a little late to know that now. I met Qin Lai in the underground garage of the old Langang building. 3 years ago, hundreds of vehicles had passed through this garage every day. The building had a new sign now, but the old blue Langang mark was still visible on the wall, most of its paint peeled away. Qin Lai looked much older than I remember. He had been my father's head of security, a former soldier with a stubborn sense of justice. Now he wore work clothes and carried a wrench, looking like an ordinary repairman. The first thing he said was not a greeting. It was a cold laugh. Young Master Lu finally remembered. There are still people alive in Linhai. I stood in the glow of the headlights. Uncle Qin. Don't call me uncle. He cut me off. Where were you 3 years ago? I was silent. He stepped closer. President Lu was in the hospital. Langang was being torn apart. Our people were being pushed out one by one. We waited for you to stand up and say something. And you, his voice dropped. You ran. I did not defend myself. I had left that year. I left with that piece of paper from my father's hospital bed. My mind in chaos and my name ruined. I trusted no one. I did not dare let anyone know what I was investigating. But saying that out loud would only sound like an excuse. I took the laminated paper from my pocket. Its edges were worn, and my father's handwriting had faded slightly. 17. Q3. Qinglan. 11:40 p.m. Qin Lai's expression changed the moment he saw it. President Lu wrote this before he lost consciousness. Qin Lai took the paper and pressed his finger against Q3. This isn't random. I know, I said. In Langang's old dispatch system, Q3 was the third checkpoint. Qin Lai looked up. I continued. According to the official records, container No. 17 only had 2 route changes, but if my father wrote Q3, that means there was a third unrecorded route change before the explosion. The garage went quiet. Chin Lai looked at me, and the anger in his eyes gradually changed into something heavier. How much have you found? Qinglan Bridge, Shu Nanzhou, a former taxi. Chin Lai frowned. Shu Nanzhou, you know him. He was on the internal list back then, Chin Lai said. He wasn't a formal Langang driver. He was an outsourced dispatcher. Before the explosion, he called the security department once. My breath caught. What? The call didn't go through, Chin Lai said. The line was cut. I clenched my fist. Chin Lai remained silent for a few seconds, then handed the paper back to me. Container number 17 was rerouted twice 2 hours before the explosion. Who changed the route? The system records were wiped, he said. But that level of permission wasn't something an ordinary dispatcher could access. Han Xiaoyuan? Chin Lai neither nodded nor shook his head. Don't throw that name around without evidence. I smiled. I came back to find evidence. Chin Lai looked at the wound on my shoulder, then at my cheap coat. And you plan to overturn a case by driving a taxi. So far, it's taken me closer to the truth than anything else. He cursed under his breath, just as stubborn as your father. After scolding me, he threw me a set of keys. The old system still has a backup port in the basement of the Pier 3 cold storage building. To restore it, we need the original dispatch code and on-site footage to match. Where is the footage? Chin Lai looked at me. That is exactly what you've been looking for. Shu Nanji was released at noon the next day. No one from the fleet dared to pick her up. I went. She stood at the entrance, pale-faced, her hair tied carelessly behind her. In her hand was the written rejection from the investigators. When she saw me, she turned and walked away. I followed. Shu Nanji. She ignored me. I reached out to stop her. She raised her hand and slapped me. It was not heavy, but it was sharp. My face turned to the side, yet I did not look away. She stared at me. Her eyes were red, but she did not cry. Are you satisfied? My throat tightened. I'm sorry. What are you sorry for? She laughed softly. For treating me like a spy, for planting a clue to test me, or for making them accuse me of helping a fugitive. I had no answer. She took one step toward me. Shen Hui, or should I call you Lu Chen? I looked up. Her gaze was cold. When they questioned me, they called your name directly. The young master of the Lu family, the one who ran 3 years ago and has now come back. Her voice was not loud, but every word seemed to burn. I don't blame you for hiding your identity. If I were you, I might have done the same. She pointed at herself. But from the beginning, you decided I wasn't clean. My fingers curled. What I saw was too coincidental. Then keep believing only what you see. Tears finally gathered in her eyes. When my brother died, everyone believed what they saw. They saw him driving a car he should not have been driving. They saw his route record marked as a violation. They saw the official report saying he had taken bribes. She looked straight at me. How are you different from them? Those words left me speechless. Cars passed along the street. The sun was bright, but my hands and feet were cold. Shu Nanji took a breath and forced back her tears. Lu Chen, I didn't save you because of who you were. Her voice turned hoarse. I saved you because someone who could be chased into the rain and D still refused to cry for help might, like me, still have something left to say. She walked past me. This time, I did not stop her, because I knew that what I owed her could not be repaid with one apology. Han Xiaoyuan's next strike landed on Shu Nanzhou. That afternoon, Linhai Metropolis Daily published another report. The Beigang explosion case resurfaces. Driver Shu Nanzhou secretly altered route in violation of regulations. The photo attached was an ID picture of Shu Nanzhou from years ago, an ordinary-looking man with gentle features, wearing a blue work uniform. The report claimed he was in debt, had taken on a private freight job, and had secretly changed his route to earn extra money, indirectly causing the explosion. The comments were even uglier than the insults aimed at me. When Shu Nanji saw the article, she was sitting in the fleet yard. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the ground. She bent down to pick it up, but her hands shook so badly that she failed twice. I walked over and picked up the phone for her. She snatched it back. Don't touch it. I handed her a printed route change log. She did not take it. What is this? 2 route changes before the explosion of container number 17. She looked up. I placed the paper on the hood of her car. I'm not asking you to believe me. See it for yourself. She stared at the document. It was a fragment from the old system that Chinlai had given me. It did not have the complete signature or final authorization, but it was enough to prove that Shu Nanzhou had never had the authority to reroute container number 17. Shu Nanji picked up the paper and read it for a long time, long enough for the wind in the yard to lift the corner of the page. Finally, she asked, "Why are you giving me this?" "Because it should have been yours from the beginning." She looked at me. I continued, "Your brother is not my tool. Neither are you." She said nothing. I took out the paper my father had left behind. My father wrote Qinglan before he fell into a coma. Shu Nanji's expression changed. "What did you say?" "Qinglan, 11:40 p.m. Her lips went pale. I asked, Do you know what that means? She was silent for a long time. Then she turned and opened the car door. Get in. Where are we going? She started the taxi. Chinglan Bridge. At dusk, the area beneath Chinglan Bridge looked even more desolate than it had at night. The bridge piers were stained with watermarks and covered in peeling flyers. Black water collected in the drainage channels. Xu Nanji parked beside the wrecked taxi. She did not get out immediately. Her fingers rested on the steering wheel, the tips white from pressure. My brother sent me a voice message before he died. She spoke quietly. 6 words. I looked at her. She closed her eyes. The third one under the bridge. Then she opened the door and got out. We walked along the bridge piers. The first, the second, the third. Behind the third drainage column was an abandoned drainage opening, blocked from the outside by chunks of concrete. I moved the concrete aside. Inside was full of mud. Xu Nanji crouched down and reached in. I grabbed her wrist. I'll do it. She did not argue. I reached into the drainage opening and felt something hard. I pulled with all my strength. A black dashcam casing came out. The shell was cracked, its edges caked with mud. The moment Xu Nanji saw it, tears filled her eyes. She reached for it carefully, as if afraid it would break. I opened the casing. It was empty. No memory card. Wind swept under the bridge. I heard Xu Nanji's breath catch. She whispered, "No." I looked at the empty casing, and my heart sank. Had Han Xiaoyuan's men already taken it? But Xu Nanji quickly raised her head. No, that isn't right. What? My brother wouldn't leave something important in the car. She wiped mud from the casing, and her eyes slowly steadied. He used to say cars get stolen and searched. Truly important things should be hidden where no one would think to look. Where? She looked at the wrecked taxi. He wasn't driving his own car that day. He was driving a substitute car. Uncle Bao said the meter had been removed. Xu Nanji looked sharply at me. I nodded. The old Fleet warehouse. She gripped the casing. Let's go. The old Fleet warehouse stood at the very back of the auto parts market. The lock had rusted red. By the time I opened it with the key Uncle Bao had given me, night had already fallen. Dust covered the warehouse in a thick layer. Half the lights were broken, making rows of old parts look as if they were submerged in dark water. Xu Nanji did not waste a second. She went straight to the metal cabinet in the corner. An old label was stuck to the front. Scrap taximeters. She opened the cabinet. Inside were more than a dozen old taximeters, all similar models. Which one? I asked. She crouched down and checked the numbers one by one. The car my brother drove. Its plate ended in 37. My heart moved. The substitute car I had been assigned also ended in 37. Xu Nanji searched to the very bottom and pulled out a meter covered in dust. Half a label clung to the back. Rep at -0937. The last 4 digits matched the VIN of the scrapped taxi under Chin Glan Bridge. That was it. Just as I reached for it, headlights lit up outside the warehouse. 1, 2, 3. The entrance was blocked. Xu Nanji clutched the meter, her face darkening. That was fast. I stepped in front of her. The warehouse door was pushed open. Han Xiaoyuan walked in. I had not seen him for 3 years, and he had barely changed. His suit was perfectly pressed. His hair was neatly combed. He did not look like a man coming to seize evidence in an old warehouse. He looked like he was attending a ribbon-cutting ceremony. More than a dozen men followed him. So did Zhou Mu. The reporter held a camera, looking uneasy. Han Xiaoyuan saw me and smiled. Lu Chen, long time no see. I smiled too. Uncle Han, the corner of his eye twitched. Back when he used to visit my home for dinner, I really had called him that. Han Xiaoyuan glanced at the meter in Xu Nanji's hand. After searching for 3 years, this is all you found. A piece of junk. Xu Nanji clenched her teeth. It belonged to my brother. Han Xiaoyuan looked at her. Your brother killed so many people. How can you still say his name? Xu Nanji stepped forward, but I held her shoulder. She was trembling. Han Xiaoyuan's smile deepened. Lu Chen, didn't your father teach you to overturn a case? You need evidence, not useless people like the sister of a dead driver, and not a washed-up heir who ran away. I looked at him. You're afraid of this old meter? Afraid? He sounded amused. If I were afraid, would I have let you get this far? He raised his hand. The men behind him began to close in. Hand it over. I can spare her some pain. As for you, Lu Chen, your timing is perfect. He looked at Zhou Mo. Reporter Zhou, keep filming. Let Lin Hai see how the young master of the Lu family, who fled for 3 years out of fear, came back to steal evidence from an old case. Zhou Mu held the camera without moving. Han Xiaoyuan turned. What are you standing there for? Zhou Mu's throat moved. Then he turned on the camera. The red light came on. Han Xiaoyuan smiled with satisfaction. He thought the camera was his nut. He did not know someone else was holding the handle. I took out my phone and sent Chin Lai 2 words. Start now. Then, I looked at Zhou Mum. Reporter Zhou, make sure you get a clear shot. Zhou Mu looked up. I said, 3 years ago, when you filmed the Lu family, you left out a lot. Let's make up for it today. Han Xiaoyuan's smile froze. What do you mean? In the corner of the warehouse, an old computer suddenly lit up. Chin Lai's voice came through the phone. The old system port is connected. Lu Chen, You have one chance. I took out the torn dispatch code. Shu Nanji placed the meter on the table. I pried open the back cover with a screwdriver. There was no cash drawer inside. No circuit board either. Wedged into the innermost compartment was a blackened memory card. The moment Shu Nanji saw it, tears rose in her eyes. She did not speak. She only wiped them away hard, with the back of her hand. Han Xiaoyuan's expression finally changed. Grab it. His men rushed forward. At that moment, a wave of taxi horns erupted outside the warehouse. Uncle Bao and the fleet had blocked the entrance. More than a dozen taxis lined up across the road, headlights blazed. Uncle Bao held a wrench. His voice shook, but he did not step back. Anyon who touches Nanji today gets run over by our fleet first. Han Xiaoyuan shouted. Bao Chuan, do you not want your operating license anymore? Uncle Bao gritted his teeth. I've been shameless for 3 years. That's enough. In the chaos, I inserted the memory card into the reader. The computer screen went black for 1 second. Then a video appeared. The image shook badly. It had been captured by a dashcam. The timestamp was 11:36 p.m., the night of the Beigang explosion 3 years ago. The camera showed the temporary parking area beneath Qinglan Bridge. A truck was parked in the shadows. Only half of the container number could be seen. 17. Q. Someone was replacing the seal. A man's rapid breathing could be heard in the video. It was Xu Nanzhou. Container number 17 has been moved. The seal is wrong. It isn't the original container. The footage moved forward. The camera caught a side profile. Han Xiaoyuan's assistant. I knew that man. After the explosion, he became operations director at Beigang United. Xu Nanji stared at the screen, biting her lip until it bled. In the video, Xu Nanzhou made a call in a low voice. Security department. This is Xu Nanzhou from outsourced dispatch. There's a problem with container number 17. They swapped it. The call did not connect. Only a busy tone came through. He cursed under his breath and started the car. The camera followed the truck toward Beigang. 23:40. The rear of the container appeared again. This time, the serial number was nearly visible, but the rain was too heavy. Part of it blurred. Han Xiaoyuan suddenly smiled, as if he had found his last straw. What does that prove? A blurry video. A dead man's nonsense. He pointed at the screen. You can even see the full container number. What makes you say it was number 17? Because this dead man said so. Xu Nanji spun toward him. I held her back. Then I placed my father's note in front of the camera. Here. I looked at the screen. Container number 17, checkpoint Q3, Qinglan Bridge, 11:40 p.m. On the other end of the call, Chin Lai typed quickly. Old system records appeared one after another. Container number 17, Beigang. Original number LG-17, Q3089. Third unregistered checkpoint time 23:40. Location Qinglan Bridge Outer Ring Road entrance. Missing digits 089. I placed my father's incomplete dispatch code beside the screen. Shot from the video. The blurred section matched 089. Exactly. Xu Nanzhou's video had captured the scene. My father's dispatch code completed the number. 2 pieces of evidence, separated for 3 years, finally fit together. The warehouse fell deathly silent. Zhou Mu held the camera with trembling hands, but he did not move it away. I looked at Han Xiaoyuan. Clear enough now. Han Xiaoyuan's face turned gray. It's fake. I nodded. Keep talking. Another permission log appeared on the screen. Chin Lai's voice was steady. The authorization for the third route change came from Langang's Deputy General Manager Access Port. Operator account, HSY. Han Xiaoyuan took one step back. I continued. You deleted the main system records, but you forgot my father's dispatch system kept checksum backups. You destroyed the port surveillance footage, but you never imagined a night shift taxi driver's dashcam would catch the container swap. I stepped forward, and you never imagined the driver you framed as a violator would hide the evidence in a taximeter before he died. Xu Nanji spoke suddenly. Her voice was hoarse. Why did my brother die that night? Han Xiaoyuan said nothing. The video was still playing. Xu Nanzhou had followed the truck all the way to the Beigang Outer Ring Road. Then came the sound of an explosion. The screen turned white. The car shook violently. Xu Nanzhou panted as if he had been injured, but he did not flee immediately. He pulled over, reached for the dashcam, and began taking it apart. The final audio was very faint. Nanji. Xu Nanji froze. On the screen, Xu Nanzhou coughed several times. Don't believe them. I didn't blow up the cargo. The third one under the bridge. The video ended. No one in the warehouse spoke. Xu Nanji stood before the screen, tears streaming down her face, but she made no sound. 3 years. Everyone had said her brother was greedy. Everyone had said he broke the rules. Everyone had said he deserved it. But in his final moments, he had not tried to save himself. He had tried to save the truth. Han Xiaoyuan suddenly rushed toward the computer. Turn it off. His men moved with him, but it was too late. The red light on Zhou Mu's camera stayed on. The live stream was still running. I looked at Han Xiaoyuan and said quietly, everyone in Linhai saw it. Outside, sirens approached. Closer and closer. Han Xiaoyuan stared at me. as if he wanted to tear me apart. Lu Chen, do you really think you've won? Not necessarily. I looked at Xu Nanji. She was looking at me too. I said softly, but this time, someone believes us. When Han Xiaoyuan was taken away, his perfect suit was in ruins. He struggled and shouted that someone had framed him. No one listened. After Zhou Mu turned off the camera, he stood there for a long time. I walked over. He whispered, 3 years ago, I took a photo. What photo? There was a taxi outside the explosion scene, he said. At the time, I only cared about photographing the Lu family's car, so I never posted it. He took an old photograph from his bag. The corners had yellowed. On a rainy night along the Beigang Outer Ring Road, a taxi was parked in the distance. Mud covered half its plate, but the last digits could still be seen. San Shiqi, Xu Nanji, took the photo. Her fingers stayed on the license plate for a long time. Zhou Mu said, I'm sorry. She did not look at him. You should say that to my brother. Zhou Mu lowered his head. That night, Linhai was loud. Online public opinion shifted faster than the wind. People began cursing Han Xiaoyuan. Some deleted old posts where they had insulted the Lu family 3 years ago. Some went to Xu Nanji's account to apologize. Others said the truth had come too late. It had. I came back too late, and Langang was already gone. The truth came too late, and my father had already lain in bed for 3 years. Justice came too late, and Xu Nanzhou could no longer hear his own name cleared. The next day, Beigang United came under investigation, and the case of the Beigang explosion was officially reopened. Han Xiaoyuan's assets were frozen. The compensation fund connected to the Langang case was raised again. Qin Lai called me and said only one thing. President, Lu knows. I went to the hospital. My father lay in the bed, thin as a skeleton. The doctor said his consciousness was recovering very slowly, but he could hear voices. I sat by the bed and held his hand. Dad. His eyelid twitched. I placed the worn piece of paper in his palm. Container number 17 has been cleared. It wasn't Langang. It wasn't you. And it wasn't Xu Nanzhou. A single tear rolled slowly from the corner of my father's eye. At that moment I lowered my head and for the first time, felt that maybe I had not come home too late. At least not too late to save what still could be saved. After the case was reopened, Xu Nanji did not see me immediately. She continued working the night shift. As usual, she did not talk much. The drivers in the fleet became more polite to her than before. Whenever Uncle Bao saw her, he would avoid her like he owed her 8 million yuan. When I went to the garage to find her, she was replacing the rearview mirror, a new one. I stood there for a while, watching. Do I have to pay for it? She did not even look up. Can you afford it? I smiled. After the compensation comes through, maybe. She tightened a screw. Young masters really do speak differently. I don't have many cars right now either. Does a taxi count? It counts. She finally glanced at me. Her gaze was no longer as cold as before, but it was not exactly warm either. Get in. I paused. Where are we going? Night shift. I got into the passenger seat. The car was still very clean. The old route folder was still on the dashboard, but a new sheet of paper had been placed inside it. It was no longer a map of surveillance blind spots. It was a list of applicants for the Accident Compensation Fund. The first name was Xu Nanzhou. The second was Lu Heng. Many more names followed. I stared at it for a long time. Xu Nanji started the taxi. The night lights of Linhai slid past both sides of the window. We drove along the Beigang Outer Ring Road, past the abandoned overpass, and through the hidden road beneath the bridge, where she had once helped me shake off my pursuers. She suddenly asked, "Are you still afraid I'll take you down the wrong road?" I looked ahead. The road was very dark. No cameras. No streetlights. 3 years ago, I thought evidence only existed inside systems and files. Later, I realized some truths were hidden inside a battered taxi, inside the final words of a dying man, and inside the journey of someone who had been misunderstood for 3 years, but still refused to give up. I said, "I'm afraid." Xu Nanji turned to look at me. I added, "But I trust you." She said nothing. After a long while, she gently stepped on the gas. The taxi drove into the night. This time, I did not look back.